Hello, Milwaukee Bucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. I'm your host, as always, Dean Simon. And before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and also subscribe. We are still very much on the road to 1,000 subscribers. So if you could hit that big red button down below, I would really appreciate it. We just recently crossed the 900 subscriber threshold. So can't believe we reached that kind of mark so quickly, but still trying to get to 1,000. So hit that button down below. Also, turn on post notifications so you stay up to date with all the most recent episodes and all the most recent Milwaukee Bucks updates. So, this first one, or I guess the first couple, don't necessarily have to do with the Milwaukee Bucks, the franchise, but Giannis Antetokounmpo led the Greek national team in EuroBasket to a bronze medal, which is obviously a super huge accomplishment for Giannis himself. And I believe it was Greece's first time advancing to this point in the EuroBasket tournament, or at least to a place where they could finish with a bronze medal since I think it was 2009. So, of course, this meant a lot to Giannis and Thanasis Antetokounmpo to get to a point where they're medaling in EuroBasket, which it's not saying that EuroBasket wasn't a big deal prior, but with the rise in international play and all these superstars coming from different countries and especially a lot of European countries, you got guys like Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic leading their respective teams from their respective countries. So it's not like there's no competition in EuroBasket, and of course Giannis as well to pair in with those guys. So huge accomplishment for Giannis, and even so, after he was eliminated against Alperen Şengün and Turkey, and also Cedi Osman and Shane Larkin, Adem Bona, they have a really deep team for Turkey, and of course they came away with a pretty dominant win over Greece. And Giannis in that game, though he was on a tear throughout the entire EuroBasket tournament, he was held to I believe 12 points against Turkey, and um, after the game, of course, he was visibly upset. But in the grand scheme of things, he was then overwhelmed with so much pride and gratitude, and he was just so it was unbelievable to him that he made it that far, and he said himself that it was probably his biggest accomplishment in his basketball playing career to win a medal, or to medal in general at Eurobasket for Greece. Even though he stated himself that even though he's won an NBA title, it just means something different to win a medal in a basketball tournament while wearing your country's name across your chest and fighting for your country. So that obviously it's such a huge deal for Giannis. So congratulations to he and Thanasis Antetokounmpo for bringing a bronze medal to Greece in EuroBasket. So just a very very cool development. Of course, you would have liked to see Giannis go on to win the gold for Greece, but it didn't happen. And then Turkey, after beating Greece, went on to play against Germany in the gold medal game, the final game. And Germany and Dennis Schroeder and Franz Wagner, they ended up coming away with the victory. And Dennis Schroeder hit this huge sort of last minute or last second shot to kind of seal the deal. So also congratulations to Dennis Schroeder and the German team in Eurobasket. But we're going to also talk about some recent comments that Alperen Şengün made shortly after the win against Greece and Giannis, and then prior to their gold medal game against Germany. And these comments basically had to do with the fact that Turkey was able to bottle up Giannis, but the only way that they were able to do it was just to consistently double and triple team him throughout their game. And by the end of it, of course, Giannis was still trying to kind of force the issue as the main guy for the Greek team, as you would expect him to, and not necessarily. He didn't want to be put into a position where he was forced to be a passer, but that's not saying that Giannis isn't great at playmaking. But this was apparently different from what Alperen Şengün thought, who he himself he came out and said basically to the media afterwards that um, they wanted to put Giannis in that spot because Giannis, I guess, historically isn't a great passer, and those are Alperen Şengün's words. So those were fighting words. And then after that comment, where Şengün is saying that Giannis isn't a good passer, he came out and he was questioned about it, of course, but he, of course, as Giannis always does, he gave the noble and humble response, and he was saying, I stay out of those things. I kind of keep everything to myself like that in terms of, you know, offering this huge response. He said he keeps things like that to himself, but you could go and look at on YouTube at his highlights, and then you can get back to him about if he's a good passer or not. And of course, Giannis is phenomenal, especially for the position he plays, and what's expected of him in terms of his build and and what he does to produce for his team on a nightly basis. Giannis is, of course, an excellent passer, and if you've been watching the NBA for the past near a decade now, you would clearly see this. But of course, Alperen Sengun probably feeling good about himself and good about his team and his country coming out with the win and making Giannis look small or look a little bit less imposing than he has been throughout this entire EuroBasket run. He was really saying a lot of crazy stuff, but then, of course, it was kind of poetic with Germany ending up getting the victory. Though Alperen Sengun did have 28 points in the final game, so still he didn't necessarily back up his talk, but he had a great game, just did not come out with the gold medal. And I guess you wouldn't really have liked him to after those kinds of comments. But anyways, we're gonna move forward to actual Bucks stuff a little bit because Charles Barkley, he offered a couple of quotes about, it's not specifically really about Giannis, but it's about a bunch of these star players for different NBA teams that are kind of lumped into the same group. Where if they're a really, really great star player, that maybe they're a top 3 to 5 or 7 player in the NBA, but they play for a smaller market team, the NBA and just the greater media landscape always thinks, well, why is this guy playing in this size of market? Obviously, his talent screams big market. He should go to the Lakers. He should go to whatever team. And Charles Barkley, as well as a lot of other fans and people in the media, they don't really love that. And Barkley's quote specifically, well, also I should mention that he went on Bill Simmons' podcast to offer this quote, but he said, there's this new thing now where they see a great player, especially if he's in a smaller market. They're like, he's got to get out of there. He needs to move. I'm like, damn, where were you all when I was in Philly? So this really obviously heavily ties to Giannis because, of course, this past summer it was nothing but trade rumors, and most of it was brought on by Giannis himself, saying that he would like to explore his options, but he wasn't necessarily he didn't have a foot out the door, but he was kind of threatening the Bucks a little bit indirectly, saying that, I really do love my time, or I have loved my time in Milwaukee as a Buck, but I also want to compete at the highest level. I always want to contend for a championship year in and year out. So maybe I'm gonna have to be forced to assess my options. But of course, nothing really materialized out of that. But that also it's not like Giannis wanted to leave Milwaukee because of anything anything to do with their market or anything to do with the dollar amounts that they bring in or just the overall size of uh, the market, but it was just to do with winning. And as a guy that can respect that, Charles Barkley is saying, why is everybody trying to force Giannis out of Milwaukee when he's clearly super content with being there and he loves the city and obviously he recognizes what he means to the city by now. But it's really it's getting crazy to this point that literally everybody and their mother is trying to force Giannis out and come up with all these crazy trade scenarios and predictions and things like that. Just stuff that's never going to happen of Giannis going to the Lakers to team up with Luca and LeBron somehow, or some other market like going to the Warriors, which is the more realistic option you would think to team up with Steph, because there were a lot of previous things that have tied those two together, especially Giannis going to Steph's like birthday party this past year in March, I believe. So there were more to do with those two teams, but that's besides the point. Giannis most likely will never leave the Milwaukee Bucks, and that's how it's gonna foreseeably stay. So we shouldn't be trying to, or no one should be trying to just force Giannis out of Milwaukee. But now, final thing for the day is that we're going to talk about Amir Coffey, who I have displayed and showed my overwhelming love for Amir Coffey, and the fact that I think he's going to end up being maybe the most underrated free agent signing of this entire summer, regardless of what team were to have picked him up. But the fact that he ended up with the Milwaukee Bucks, I was overjoyed. But Brew Hoops, Finley Cool, and some other writers at Brew Hoop, they've been doing this ongoing list, this ongoing ranking of just the overall Milwaukee Bucks roster and kind of just numbering off players from, I think they go from 20 all the way up to 1. And of course, there's not 20 actual roster spots for the NBA team, but they do, I believe, the 15 guys and then maybe a couple training camp guys and a couple G League guys. So from 20 to like 17, they had guys like Tyler Smith and guys like Jamari Bouye and Pete Nance and Mark Sears. And now we've gotten all the way up to 13 on Finley Cool's latest update to this list. And that's where Amir Coffey ranks. And along with this ranking, he also offered the statement of, it's more than likely that he's going to be a guaranteed player on this roster, and that he's, even though he is on a training camp deal, like an Exhibit 10 deal, he's most likely going to land a fully guaranteed spot, and not necessarily in the Bucks rotation, but on the roster. He will be on the roster, on the Bucks bench, and he'll likely be able to contribute on a decent level. But Finley Cool's actual quote from the article about him was, "Why rank a player on a training camp deal, you ask? Excuse me. Well, Amir Coffey is in an interesting position on this Bucks roster, as he's flat out better than every small forward not named Kyle Kuzma. You can make the argument this past year that maybe he was at least comparable to Kyle Kuzma, maybe even better just due to an efficiency standpoint and just the fact that his production based on that efficiency was arguably better than what Kyle Kuzma put forth for the Bucks in the second half of the regular season and in the playoffs. But Coffey, a 6-year NBA vet, has proved himself over time as a useful bench piece who can also scale up and be productive in a bigger role when needed. Generally, role playing forwards in today's league, especially those on playoff teams, are expected to have dribble, pass, shoot skill sets, which just perfectly explains Amir Coffey. Coffey can do all of those things. He's a career 38.4% shooter from beyond the arc who can heat up in a jiffy and fill up the scoring column. In 67 career starts, the Minnesota product has averaged an efficient 12.4 points. And Amir Coffey's only continuing to get better and better. And this past season with the Clippers, he was really able to show his offensive arsenal. And I feel like he could end up being an underrated defensive piece if he really hones in on that end of the floor. He, like a lot of other players on this Bucks roster at the wings, he has a lot of natural athletic gifts that could really, really lend themselves to great defense. But it's just, we're going to have to see. It's going to be a matter of time. Is he going to focus more on his catch and shoots and decision making, whether he's going to attack closeouts and get to the rim? Is he going to work more on his defense, especially on the perimeter in terms of rotating in more efficient ways and things like that? But again, just from a natural physical standpoint, he has all the tools to be a very successful and high impact defender. But he'll most likely be focusing on how he can contribute as a scorer off the bench, because that's really what the Milwaukee Bucks will need out of a guy that's coming in to play the 3 or play a really, really small ball 4. They're gonna need guys that can catch and shoot, that can, again, attack those closeouts and then make very quick and succinct decisions off of those kinds of plays and just make those kinds of reads, especially in high leverage situations. And that could definitely be Amir Coffey, that he has the skill set to do all of those things and perform at a high level in that kind of role. And that's what I'm looking forward to going to this year. So I don't think that this is a bad ranking. I think he could rank easily even higher than number 13, but he's going to have to get used to the system and just get reps in going throughout the season. And first of all, he's going to have to land that guaranteed spot on the roster. So we're going to have to see that come to fruition first. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. Again, I'm your host as always, Dean Simon. And before you leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Again, still on that road to 1,000 subscribers. All right, I will see you guys in the next one. Go Bucks.